I paid for my sister's entire college education. The day she graduated, she stood at the podium and dedicated her degree to everyone who believed in her, then left me out entirely. Later that night, she told our parents I'd made her feel like a charity case the whole time. 4 years of tuition, rent, textbooks, and groceries. Then she left my name off her graduation speech and told our parents I had been holding it over her head. My name is Okonkwo. I'm 32 years old. 4 years ago, I paid for my younger sister's college education, tuition, housing, textbooks, a laptop, a monthly living stipend. I paid for all of it, every semester for 4 years, without ever asking for a single thing in return. My sister graduated with honors last spring. She gave a speech at the ceremony. She thanked her professors, her friends, her parents, and her boyfriend. She did not say my name. Not once. Not in the speech. Not at the dinner afterward. Not in the family toast. Not in a quiet moment pulled aside in the parking lot. Nowhere. And that night, when I sent her a simple text telling her I was proud of her, she responded by telling me that I had always made her feel like she owed me, that my generosity had felt suffocating, that she could never feel proud of herself without my support hanging over everything like a weight. I had paid for 4 years of her life. And I was the problem. This is the story of what happens when you give someone everything quietly, and they decide that quiet generosity is the same as control. I grew up in a tight family. My parents, Emmanuel and Grace, immigrated to the United States from Nigeria before I was born. They worked hard, sacrificed constantly, gave my sister Zara and me every opportunity they could afford. The key word is afforded. We were not wealthy. We were never wealthy. My father drove a delivery truck for 18 years. My mother worked as a home health aide and during the years when money was tightest, took overnight shifts at a convenience store on weekends. They gave us love. They gave us work ethic. They gave us the understanding that education was not optional. It was the entire point of everything else they had done. I went to college on a combination of scholarships, federal aid, and part-time work. I studied on weekend nights while my classmates went out. I graduated with a degree in computer science and a small amount of student loan debt that I paid off in 3 years. I got a job at a software company in Atlanta, worked my way up, took night classes to expand my skills, and by my late 20s I was earning more money than both of my parents combined. I do not say that to boast. I say it because it is the context without which none of what follows makes sense. When I was doing well, I helped my family. I paid off my parents' car when the transmission went and they couldn't cover the repair. I sent money home during a winter when my father was ill and couldn't work for 6 weeks. I covered my mother's dental work when her insurance fell short of the cost. I paid for a new refrigerator when theirs died in August, and they were trying to decide whether to eat the food before it spoiled or spend money they didn't have. This is what you do. This is what I was raised to do. You don't hoard good fortune. You bring it back to the people who helped you build the foundation you're standing on. Zara is 4 years younger than me. She is, and has always been, the brilliant one. The one teachers called gifted and meant it without qualification. Where I am methodical and patient and comfortable with systems, Zara is electric. She moves fast through ideas, connects things that don't seem connected, argues with a precision and fluency that makes people who don't know her underestimate her until they are in the middle of losing a debate. She was always going to be a writer or a scholar or something that required that particular kind of intelligence. There was never a question about that. The question was always going to be how. When she was accepted into the university's English literature program, the whole family celebrated in a way I hadn't seen us celebrate since I had graduated years before. My mother cooked. My father sat at the kitchen table looking at the acceptance letter like it was a religious document. Zara couldn't stop smiling. She had gotten into a real program, a serious department at a real school. But our parents couldn't cover it. My father had been laid off from the delivery company 14 months before Zara's first semester. He was 53 years old and looking for steady work in a market that was not kind to men at that stage. My mother was holding the household together on her income alone, and she was doing it carefully, by the thinnest of margins. Zara had earned a partial academic scholarship, a meaningful one, genuinely hard to win, that covered roughly a third of the annual tuition. The rest, plus housing and books and daily living, was a number my parents could not reach. There had been a backup school, a less expensive community college that had also accepted her. Zara was trying to be gracious about the possibility of going there. She kept saying it would still be a good education. She kept saying she didn't need the name on the diploma. She was saying all of it to be considerate, but every time she said it, I could see what it was costing her. The way her voice dropped slightly when she said the backup school's name. The way her eyes went to a different middle distance. I asked her to have dinner with me. Just her and me, no parents, no conversation about what was being decided. Just food and each other. We sat at a restaurant near my apartment. She ordered a side salad because she was being careful about spending even at a meal I had already said I was covering. She had always been that way. She never assumed. I want to help you go to the school you were accepted to, I said. She looked up from her water glass. The scholarship covers a third. I can cover the rest. Maya. Tuition, housing, textbooks. And I'll send you money every month so you're not working 2 jobs while you're trying to read and write and actually learn. I don't want you doing what I had to do. That's tens of thousands of dollars over 4 years. I know what it is. I've already put together a budget. You can't do that. I can. The question is whether you'll let me. She was quiet for a while. I watched her sitting with it, the offer, what it meant about the disparity between our situations, what it would require her to accept. Why? She finally asked. It was a fair question. An honest one. Because you're my sister, I said. Because you're the smartest person I know, and you should not have to attend a school you're settling for. And because I had people who believed in me when I was where you are now, and this is how I passed that forward. She thought about it. I don't want to owe you for the rest of my life, she said. This isn't a loan. It's a gift. Gifts don't create debt. I'm not going to bring it up. I'm not going to track it. I'm not going to ask you to account for anything. I just want you to go and work hard and graduate. That's all. She cried. The kind of crying that comes when something you had mentally released comes back to you. The relief kind. Thank you, she said. I mean it completely. Just graduate, I said. That's all I need. So she went. And I paid. In the first year, I covered the tuition shortfall, her dormitory room and meal plan, textbooks that totaled more than I had anticipated because her department required a lot of them, and a new laptop because the one she'd been using since high school was 5 years old and would not survive 4 years of academic writing. I wired the tuition payments directly to the university's billing office every semester. I set up an automatic monthly transfer into her checking account for living expenses. Enough for groceries, transit, and the small costs of a life. In the second year, the same structure. I also covered a plane ticket home at Thanksgiving when she told me she was going to stay on campus because the fare was expensive, and I told her that was not going to happen and bought it before she could argue. In the third year, she moved off campus into an apartment with 2 roommates. Her share of the rent was lower than dormitory housing had been, which made the numbers slightly more manageable. I continued the monthly transfer and covered the tuition balance. In the fourth year, the same. Plus an emergency wire in October when her laptop charger died 2 days before midterm papers were due, and she needed a replacement overnight. I sent the money before she finished the text explaining the situation. I never announced any of this. Not to my parents in full detail. Not on social media. Not to my friends in a way that was performative. I told my parents I was helping with Zara's education. They knew that much. But I did not share the specific numbers because I knew my father would carry shame about it that he didn't need to carry. He had worked hard his entire life. He didn't need the precise accounting of what his daughter had done in his place. I kept no running total in front of Zara either. I did not send her monthly summaries of what had been transferred. I did not remind her before the holidays what I had given. I treated the money the way you treat a gift. You give it, you stop talking about it, and you let the recipient get on with their life. There were moments across those 4 years when I could have said something. When a natural opening presented itself and I chose not to walk through it. At Thanksgiving in her first year, my father made a comment at the table about Zara being the first in the family to attend a 4-year university. He said it with enormous pride, the kind of pride that comes from imagining something for 20 years and finally seeing it arrive. My mother wiped her eyes. Zara beamed. No one mentioned how it was being funded. I raised my glass and said, "To Zara." And that was all. When Zara told me, in the spring of her second year, that her grades had placed her in the top 10% of her class, she sent me a voice message. She sounded light and surprised, as though she had not quite expected herself to be capable of it. I listened to it 3 times. I texted back, "I'm not surprised at all. This is exactly where you belong." She sent back a string of heart emojis. Not once did either of us mention the money. I think looking back that I had constructed this system of careful silence as a form of respect. I didn't want Zara to feel watched. I didn't want her to feel that her grades were being reported back to an investor, or that her social life was being evaluated by someone who had a financial stake in her outcomes. I wanted the money to be inert. I wanted it to do its work and then disappear, leaving her free. What I had not accounted for was that silence, when it persists long enough in both directions, stops feeling like freedom. It starts feeling like a space that people fill with whatever interpretation makes the most sense to them. I gave Zara silence because I thought silence was respectful. She filled that silence with something I didn't intend. And by the time I found out what she had been filling it with, it was midnight on graduation day. Over 4 years, the relationship between Zara and me was genuinely good. I want to say that clearly because it matters for understanding what the ending felt like. She called me when she needed advice about a class she was struggling to connect with. She texted me funny observations from her literature seminars, things her professors had said, arguments that had broken out during discussions, books she was falling in love with. She sent photographs of the campus in autumn because she remembered that I had always loved fall and had chosen Atlanta partly for the quality of its October light. In her sophomore year, a professor returned an essay with a grade that crushed her. She had worked on it for 2 weeks. She was sure it was the best thing she had written. She got a C. She called me late at night, past 11 when she normally wouldn't, and she was crying before she finished explaining what had happened. I sat on my couch in Atlanta and I stayed on that phone call for almost 90 minutes. I did not tell her the grade didn't matter. I did not offer her the kind of hollow reassurance that would have insulted her intelligence. I listened to her describe the essay, the professor's comments, what she thought she had done and what she now believed she had missed. And then I asked her questions until she talked herself into understanding what the professor had been responding to and what she would do differently. By the end of the call, she was no longer crying. She said, "You're really good at this." I said, "You did the work. I just listened." She said, "You always know how to make me feel like I can figure things out." In her junior year, she was accepted into an honors thesis program with a competitive acceptance process. She called me when the email arrived. "I got in," she said. "Of course you did." "I wasn't sure. The acceptance rate is genuinely low." "You are genuinely prepared. Congratulations." "Thank you," she said, "for believing in me." I heard that as what a younger sister says to an older one who has been in her corner. I filed it away as one of the good moments. I understand now, looking back, that there may have been something more precise in the way she phrased it. That believing in me was a particular word choice. That she may have been thanking me for one specific thing while carefully not naming another. But I did not hear it that way at the time. At the time I just felt glad. Her graduation was in May, on a warm Saturday that felt like the actual beginning of summer. I drove to the university the morning of the ceremony. My parents had driven up the day before and spent the night in a motel near campus. My mother had pressed her good dress, the dark blue one with the structured neckline that she keeps for occasions that require formality. My father wore his good suit and was quieter than usual in the way he gets when he is moved by something that has arrived after a long wait. We met in the parking lot and walked in together. My mother bought a program from the table near the entrance. She found Zara's name in the list of award recipients and put her finger under it, and left it there while we found seats. The ceremony ran for nearly 3 hours. There were administrative remarks and a faculty address and a keynote speaker who was thoughtful and ran slightly over time. Then the departmental awards. Zara had won the award for excellence in English literature, the highest departmental distinction for graduating seniors. It came with a speaking slot of 2 to 3 minutes at the podium. Her speech had been printed in the program. I read it before she got up, scanning quickly, finding the names she had listed. Faculty, roommates, boyfriend, parents. I closed the program and watched her walk to the podium. She was composed. She had always been good in front of rooms. She stood with her shoulders back and she looked out at the arena in a way that was confident but not performative, and I felt in that moment entirely proud of her. Whatever she was about to say, whoever she was about to thank, I was sitting in those bleachers 4 rows from the floor, and I was proud of her in a way that had nothing to do with anything else. She thanked her department faculty by name, both of them specifically and warmly. She thanked her thesis advisor with particular care, described what working with her had meant. She thanked her 2 roommates and named them. She thanked her boyfriend, David, and said he had kept her sane during the hardest stretches. She thanked her parents for the values they had given her, for the sacrifices they had made long before she was old enough to understand them, for instilling in her the belief that education was a form of freedom. She did not say my name. I held very still in my seat. I looked at the program in my lap. I looked back at the podium. She was finishing. She was stepping back from the microphone. The room was applauding. I told myself several things in rapid succession. The speech was edited for time. 2 or 3 minutes goes quickly when you're naming every person who matters. She was being careful not to single out one sibling when we have no other siblings, which was the version of that thought that fell apart immediately once I formed it. She would say something at dinner. This was not the right venue for a financial acknowledgement. She was being thoughtful by keeping it private. I applauded with everyone else. We found her outside after the procession, in the crowd of gowns and families and flowers and cameras. My mother gathered her first and held on for a long time. My father put his hand on her head the way he always does when he is proudest and has no words for it. Her boyfriend David was there with his own family. Her roommates were taking photographs and shrieking pleasantly the way people do when the thing they'd been working toward is suddenly behind them. I hugged her and said, "You did it. I'm so proud of you." She beamed. She was the center of everything and she should have been. I stepped back and let the moment be what it was supposed to be. I took photographs on my phone. I smiled when she looked in my direction. I stood at the edge of the circle of people who loved her and I was genuinely happy that she was happy. There was a moment in the parking lot outside the arena when it was just Zara and me for about 30 seconds while our parents walked ahead and David stopped to answer a phone call. Just the two of us in the sunshine, with her diploma case in her hand and her cap slightly askew. I thought, this is the moment. This is where she'll say something. She looked at me and smiled. "I can't believe it's over," she said. "You should be so proud of yourself," I said. "I am," she said. "I really am." And then David caught up and the moment was absorbed back into the crowd. We went to dinner at a restaurant my parents had selected because they had a discount for it, and it was within what they could contribute. I handed my card to the server before anyone sat down and asked him to run the full dinner on it. I did that quietly, as I had done everything else quietly for 4 years, without announcement or expectation of comment. The dinner was warm. The food was good enough. My father was more talkative than he had been all day, released from the ceremonial formality of the arena into the more comfortable intimacy of a restaurant table. He told a story about the week before I had left for college, a story I had heard before but that still made my mother laugh. Zara was relaxed and happy in the way of someone who has finished something large, and is only now beginning to feel the full relief of it. My mother gave a toast. She thanked God for bringing the family through everything. She thanked the university. She listed the professors Zara had mentioned in her speech. She thanked Zara's friends. She said something tender about my father. She said something about herself, about the nights she had worked so that her children could have a different kind of life. She thanked everyone who had helped make the day possible. She did not say my name. I don't believe my mother omitted me out of cruelty or calculation. I think she didn't know the full scope of what I had given, and what she did know had settled into the general category of the family's collective effort rather than standing alone as something that required specific public recognition. I think, in her understanding of the story, my contribution was part of a larger fabric rather than the central thread that held the whole thing together. But sitting there with my raised glass and my unspoken name, that distinction didn't provide much comfort. I raised my glass with everyone else. I drank. I smiled. Zara said nothing that evening to fill the space I had been quietly tending. Not at dinner. Not in the parking lot when we said our goodbyes. My parents heading back toward the highway, David loading luggage into his car, Zara wrapped in a borrowed cardigan against the evening chill. Not in a text sent on the drive. Not in a quiet word pulled aside. I drove home on the highway with 4 hours of empty road ahead of me, and the particular silence of someone who has been holding their breath for a long time and finally stopped. I was not angry. I want to say that precisely because angry is too simple and too hot for what I was feeling. I was sitting with something quieter and harder than anger. I was sitting with the specific sensation of having done something real and significant and having it be entirely unmarked. Not argued with. Not disputed. Not misunderstood. Just absent from the record of the day. Invisibility. That is the word I would use now. The invisibility of the person whose contribution is so woven into the structure of what was celebrated that no one thinks to name it separately, like thanking the architect after you tour the house. When I got home, I sat in my car in the parking garage, just for a few minutes. Then I went inside and I sent Zara the text I described at the beginning of this story. "Congratulations. I'm so proud of you." It was true. Every word of it. She responded at nearly midnight. "Thanks. Also, I've been meaning to say this for a while. You've always made me feel like I owe you for the money. Like I can never just be proud of myself without it being about what you did for me. I needed you to know that. I read it 3 times slowly to make sure I was understanding it correctly. Then I called her. She answered after 2 rings. And she elaborated, in that calm and careful way people speak when they have been rehearsing something for a while. She said she had felt suffocated by the way I provided the support. Not by anything I had said specifically, she was quick to clarify, but by the weight of the situation itself, by the fact of the debt, even though I had said it wasn't a debt, hanging over every accomplishment, by the feeling that she could never fully own what she had earned because a significant portion of it had been funded by someone else. She said she had spent 4 years working to prove to herself that she was capable, and that the presence of my support had always complicated that for her, had made it hard to know where her own effort ended and my generosity began. She said she needed me to understand that. I let her finish. Then I asked, When? When did I say something that made you feel that way? Give me one specific example, one conversation, one text, one comment at a family dinner. Just one. She was quiet. I need one moment, I said. Not a feeling. An actual moment. She said it wasn't about specific moments. It was about the accumulated weight of the situation, the knowledge that the money was there. I said, Zara, I paid for 4 years of your education without a single comment about it. I set up the transfers and I stepped back. I never asked you to explain your grades or your choices to me. I never referenced it during family gatherings. I never brought it up in any conversation that wasn't about the logistics of the money itself. And tonight you stood at a podium and thanked 20 people by name. I was in that arena. I watched you thank your roommates and your boyfriend and your parents. And you left me out of the entire record of the day. She said, I didn't want my graduation speech to be about money. I said, then it shouldn't have included your parents, because they could not pay for a single semester. There was silence. I was not proud of saying that. It was sharper than anything I had said in 4 years of funding her education without complaint, but it was also precise. It was true, and there are moments when the pressure of the unsaid finally finds a seam and comes through. She said, I knew you would eventually make this about yourself. I said, good night. Congratulations on graduating. And I hung up. The next morning my mother called me. Zara had told her about the exchange. My mother was upset in a way I couldn't entirely read, not clearly on Zara's side, but clearly troubled, clearly in the mode of wanting the conflict to stop rather than wanting it resolved. She said she knew I had given a great deal and she was grateful. She also said that Zara was young and had been under pressure for 4 years and that I needed to extend grace. I asked my mother, quietly, whether she knew the full amount I had paid over 4 years. She said she knew I had helped significantly. I told her the number, the full number, somewhere between $46,000 and $48,000, which did not include the dinner the previous evening. My mother was silent for a moment. Then she said, Maya, we are grateful. You know that. She did not say, I will speak to your sister about this. She did not say, she should have said your name. She said, you know that we love you. My father called an hour later. He told me not to let money become more important than family. He told me Zara had worked hard for her accomplishment. He told me I should let it go. I asked him, the way I had asked my mother, whether he had known the full figure. He said yes. He said they were grateful. He did not say anything about what Zara owed me. He did not say anything about what had been omitted from the speech. He said, don't make this about the money. I got off the phone. I spent the next several days sitting quietly with all of it, waiting to see whether Zara would send something that looked like a second thought, whether she would reach back and clarify that she had spoken in the heat of feeling and meant something different, whether she would acknowledge in any form what had been missing from graduation day. For days later she texted, I know what I said came out harsh. I do appreciate everything you've done. I just needed you to know how it made me feel. It was not an apology. It was the grammar of an apology arranged around a restatement. The I'm sorry that isn't one, dressed in the clothes of one, the version that acknowledges your pain while protecting the position that caused it. I did not respond. In the weeks since graduation, I have not contributed financially to anything in Zara's life. There was a family group chat conversation about helping her with a security deposit for an apartment in New York, where she was starting her job. My parents asked whether I could contribute. I read the message. I did not reply. My mother called separately. I told her, plainly and without hostility, that I was not in a position to help right now, that after the conversation at graduation, I needed some distance from the pattern of giving. My mother said, "You know she didn't mean it the way it came out." I said, "Maybe not, but she said it, and on the same day she chose not to say my name in a room full of people. Both of those things are true at the same time." My mother said, "We love you. You know that." I said, "Gratitude that stays private is just silence." She didn't answer that. Here is what I have been sitting with since. I do not regret paying for Zara's education. I want to be clear about that in a way that is difficult to be clear about, because it sounds like something you say to make yourself look generous rather than something you actually mean. But I mean it. She is genuinely brilliant. She deserved the opportunity. She earned her honors distinction through real work and real ability, and none of that changes because of what happened at graduation. What I could not have predicted was what 4 years of financial support, given without strings, would look like from inside it. I had believed, and I think this is an important belief to name, because it is one that many generous people carry without examining it, that giving cleanly meant the giving would be received cleanly. That if I asked for nothing and mentioned it never, the person receiving it would feel nothing complicated about it. That is not what happened. Zara had to carry the knowledge of what I was doing every single day for 4 years. She couldn't erase it. She couldn't match it. She couldn't neutralize it through repayment because I had told her explicitly it wasn't a loan. Every time she submitted a tuition payment that she hadn't earned herself, every time the monthly transfer arrived on the first of the month like a reminder, she had to sit inside the fact of her dependence on me. And I, who never mentioned it, had not given her a way to put it down. I had told her not to worry about it and assumed that instruction would be easy to follow. It was not. I think about the junior year phone call when she got into the honors thesis program. She said, "Thank you for believing in me." I heard the warmth in it and thought, this is what it feels like to have done something right. What I did not hear, what I'm not sure she had fully formed yet, was the careful architecture of that thank you. She was thanking me for the faith, not for the money. She was already, even then, working out how to hold what I had given her in a way that belonged to her, and she had found a frame that made it feel like mine was a different category of contribution. I understand the human impulse behind that. I do. When you cannot repay something, you find ways to minimize it in your own mind so you can live with yourself. You reframe the gift as a form of expectation. You tell yourself there were invisible strings because invisible strings make you less indebted than you actually are. I understand it. And it still costs me something I did not expect to lose. My therapist, whom I started seeing about 6 weeks after graduation, has helped me think about this more carefully than I would have been able to on my own. She pointed out that I had given generously but invisibly, that by never acknowledging the weight of what I was doing, I had also inadvertently taken away Zara's ability to acknowledge it back. There was no shared language for what the gift was or what it meant. No framework we had built together. Just money moving quietly every month, and a silence that Zara had apparently filled with feelings she never once brought to me. My therapist asked me in our 3rd session, "What did you need Zara to do that she didn't?" I said, "I needed her to let me exist in her success. Not own it. Not be credited with it. Just be present in it. Just have my name somewhere in the record of the day." She said, "That is a small and reasonable thing to have needed." Yes, it is. It is a small thing to have needed. It is something I would not have thought twice about giving her, had our positions been reversed. And it is something Zara could have offered me at no cost to herself, without diminishing one syllable of her own accomplishment, without turning her graduation into anything other than what it was. She could have said my name. She chose not to. And then, before the day was even over, she had reframed the entire 4 years of my giving as something that had been done to her. That is the part one am still processing. Not the exclusion from the speech. As painful as that was, I can find a way to understand it, to believe that she was overwhelmed or unprepared or genuinely uncertain of how to frame it in public. The part one cannot fully settle is that she had a midnight text ready. That she had been, in her own words, meaning to say it for a while. That she had been carrying the grievance about feeling suffocated by my support for some unspecified stretch of time without once bringing it to me. Not once in 4 years. Not one phone call. Not one conversation. Not one afternoon. She let me pay. She let me drive up and help her move apartments. She let me stay on the phone at 11 o'clock at night when she was crying about a grade. She let me buy her a plane ticket home for Thanksgiving. She let me wire $300 for a laptop charger with 15 minutes of warning. She received all of it. And she delivered her grievance on the night it would cause the most damage, after the moment when she could have done something kind instead had already passed. I am not a saint in this story. I said something to Zara on the phone that night that I do not take back, but that was sharper than the person I try to be. I have not responded to the apartment deposit request, and I am aware that this choice has consequences for Zara's situation and for my relationship with my parents. I am also aware that I expected something. I had told Zara it was a gift with no strings, and underneath that I had carried an image of what graduation day would look like. Not a speech dedicated to me, not a plaque, not a production. Just my name. Just acknowledgement. Just the simple spoken record that I had been there. That was an expectation I had not named out loud, not even to myself, not until the day it wasn't met. I am working on understanding what that means about me. I am also working on refusing to let that unexamined expectation become the thing that justifies what Zara did. Both can be true. I can have wanted something I didn't say out loud, and she can still have had no right to deliver a grievance on the night she was supposed to be grateful. I am 32 years old. I have a career I worked hard to build. I have friends who know me and value me in ways that are not transactional and do not require anything of me that I haven't chosen to give. I have a life that is good and full and does not depend structurally on whether my sister ever says my name. But I also have a sister I no longer know how to be close to. A mother who is choosing not to take a side in a situation where I believe a side is clearly warranted. A father who used the word money like it was something shameful, on a day when money was the entire reason his daughter was a college graduate. I have been thinking about what I would say to Zara if we were ever in a room together and the conversation was honest enough to go there. I think I would say I didn't need a monument. I didn't need a speech dedicated to me or a plaque or a toast that went on too long. I needed 30 seconds. I needed the record of that day to include me somewhere in it. I needed to know that you knew the difference between what your scholarship covered and what I covered, and that the knowledge of that difference didn't make you want to erase me from the story entirely. I would say you thanked David. David, who had been in your life for 2 years, and who I'm sure was a genuine source of support. You thanked your roommates. You thanked 2 professors by their full names. You thanked your parents who love you completely and who could not give you the specific thing that put you in that building on that day. And you did not say my name. That is not about money. That is about whether I existed to you as someone who had done something real. And the answer you gave without meaning to on the day you had the longest and most careful list of names you'd ever prepared was, not in public. Not in the official record. Not in the version of the story you're going to tell. I do not know what comes next with Zara. She has not reached back with anything that looks like a real accounting of what happened. Our conversations, when they occur, are surface level in the careful way of 2 people who are aware that something true has been said and neither is ready to face it yet. Maybe the distance will clarify something for her. Maybe she will sit in the quiet of her new city and her new job and think about what it means that the person who made it possible is no longer available in the way she once was. Maybe she will realize eventually that my silence is not spite. It is simply what happens when the person who has been giving a great deal finally stops. Or maybe she won't. Maybe she will tell the story of our dynamic as evidence of how complicated family relationships are, without ever quite naming the specific complication that made it complicated. Maybe my $46,000 will exist in that story as a subtext she doesn't say out loud because saying it out loud would require her to say something else out loud too. If she does that, she is rewriting something that actually happened. And the record of what actually happened lives in my bank statements and in 4 years of transfer confirmations, and in a graduation program where her name appears under departmental awards and mine appears nowhere at all. That record is mine. I am not releasing it. I gave my sister the education she deserved. I gave it cleanly and consistently, and without a single comment about what it cost me. I showed up for 4 years in every way that mattered and in many ways that went unnoticed. I stood in that arena on her biggest day and I applauded with everything I had. And I deserved to have my name said out loud. That is the smallest possible version of what I was owed. The most basic acknowledgement that a person who does something significant for someone they love could reasonably expect. Not a ceremony. Not a dedication. Not even a whole paragraph. Just a name. It is the one thing I did not receive. Have you ever given quietly for years and found yourself erased from the moment your giving made possible? Have you ever been told that your generosity was the problem, that by giving without strings you somehow created them anyway? Have you ever waited for your name to be said out loud and heard only silence? Have you ever been the person who funded the celebration and sat in the audience while everyone else was thanked? Share what you went through in the comments, because the people who give quietly are not always the ones who deserve to be forgotten. And sometimes the most painful thing isn't the erasure itself. It's realizing it was a choice. If you believe that 4 years of tuition and rent and textbooks and midnight phone calls deserves at least one sentence on the day it was all supposed to matter, hit that like button and subscribe. Because silence isn't gratitude. Absence from the record isn't the same as being respected. And being erased is not the same as being forgiven for caring. # she paid for everything.